looks like the sun's out today, but there's tons of clouds in certain areas, just, I guess, blocking it like a natural filter, I guess you could say. And what's going on today? I guess first was one of you said it was your birthday today. I guess happy birthday, Louis Bazooka. Is that how you actually pronounce it? I could be butchering it. Apologies if I am. What could I show for your birthday? I know you asked questions about raw juicing and stuff, but I was actually waiting for your answer. What juicer you use, because they're all different. But in general, I guess if you want to do raw juicing for energy and stuff, what I find is really great. Take about 2 pounds of carrots, maybe 2 apples, a lemon, and then put in a beet, like a small one. I find that usually gives you a ton of energy. There's my secret in many ways. How's that? In terms of having a lot of energy walking and all that. Some people actually joke I'm a quote camel because I usually don't have to rehydrate for so long. I guess that's one reason why potentially. Just eat some healthy stuff, I guess you could say. With what I read today, this one was actually kind of interesting. This one says, Israel becomes first ever country to allow drone flights in civilian airspace. And according to their minister, it says, I am proud that Israel becomes the first country which allows UAVs to operate for the benefit of agriculture, environment, fight against crime, the people, and the economy. So again, I'm trying to figure out what exactly is different than, let's just say, a place like here, minus the fact that obviously you'd have to register it and all that, and there's a lot of restrictions. From what I gather, it sounds like they're treating it more like any other huge manned aircraft. For example, if that manned aircraft can transport goods with just, I guess, this quick hey, I'm taking off today, then so can this drone now. It says, following the approval, the Elvis drone will now be able to fly in civilian airspace like any other civilian airliner, without remaining restricted to non-segregated airspace. Reports have it that the Hermes Starliner can fly for up to 36 hours at an altitude of around 7,600 meters and has the capability to carry an additional 450 kilometers of thermal, electro-optical, radar, and other payloads. Further, it will also be able to participate in anti-terror as well as border security operations, perform maritime rescue and search, take part in securing public events, and in environmental inspection and commercial aviation missions. So I don't think it affects a recreational person too much in general in terms of, let's say, benefit or something like that. But it kind of matches with the other news we've read in places like India, where a lot of places are actually dropping things like restrictions for drones and treating it more, I guess you could say, quote, normal. And over here with drone-related news, I guess it's all military-related. It says, Ottawa launches long-awaited competition for armed military drones. The federal government has officially launched a competition for the purchase of armed drones after nearly 2 decades of delays and discussion around whether Canada should buy the controversial weapons. A formal request for proposals was released Friday to 2 companies shortlisted to bid on a $5 billion contract which could see the Canadian Armed Forces launch a fleet of unmanned aerial vehicles in the next few years. All that talk again, fear-mongering, recreational drones and all that, yet usually when it comes to stuff like this, it's perfectly fine. The contradictions, I guess you could say. And with that thought of things like Canadian Armed Forces, this was kind of fascinating. It relates to those trucker protests that's happening, I guess, nationwide. And in Ottawa specifically, apparently there was an order where if people don't get off, like say that bridge and all that, they don't go home, they will be potentially arrested. Well, that was the interesting thing as I was reading this, because apparently there are a lot of, I guess, war veterans that are actually in the protests. So you can imagine how awkward that would be for, like, say, I guess, a police officer to arrest them. And this kind of made me think how it shows so many people treat this in an emotional manner where they're just trying to find, I guess, anything to, I guess, throw mud at the other side or vice versa. Here, it says protesters, many of whom appear to be veterans, are removing the fencing that was put up at the war memorial. Only 2 police officers that I can see, and they just showed up now as most was dismantled. Now, when you first read this, most people would say, so barbaric, those are veterans, stay off the war memorial and stuff like that. That's the impression you would get, correct, if you read like one side. But then when you read it from the other side, apparently they're claiming it's all peaceful and all that. Again, it's actually veterans that are removing like this fencing to protect it. Like, I guess these people here, right, Let's be so abundantly clear. Canadian veterans deconstructing peacefully a fence around a war memorial that had no threat to it, so they could peacefully pray around it and then clean it up, is as Canadian as it gets. So there, it depends on what mindset you're on. It could be interpreted in so many different ways, but it's kind of interesting too, because with that thought of police officers potentially being uncomfortable arresting, I guess, veterans, because you could see there with that news report afterwards, they updated it with some dialogue that they recorded in terms of their interactions. So you can see here, it's kind of interesting. So initially that fence was placed around for protection because I guess from reading the news, you would assume these are a bunch of, quote, crazy people. They're going to destroy everything. So the police here, they say to the guy first, you guys are going to guard this now for us? And then they respond saying, yes, that is what we're doing before. It was more a political statement. We're making the same sort of a statement, saying to the politicians, soldiers, don't sit with them. We're returning our country at this point in time. And the police says, we're trying to protect it from people causing mischief. And they say, I understand. And they kind of try to, I guess, reason with them. It says, instead of taking down the entire fence, maybe you could have part of it open so you could have brought people in and out. And then they say, good point. So it seems like it's pretty peaceful in terms of the conversation, right? And then the police says, now we're going to be back at the same point where people are now going to cause damage because unless you guys are here 24/7, and then there's a response saying, I actually don't think it's going to be the people who caused the damage. It's going to be Justin Trudeau and his gang of thieves. And if you've got to put a man on this because you guys have, what, like 1,000 cops in the city right now? So it's kind of like they're implying the police are really understaffed. So if they can't guard this with the fence, then they don't have enough people to protect it. And so I guess the protester says, we'll put a man on it then. And the cop says, excellent. This is on you guys. Perfect. Then the cop says, can I just take your name down just because I got to tell my command, you guys are the ones who are going to guard this. And it says, after this, the crowd drowns them out, and it's a very tricky to hear. The first protester defers to the second, who does appear to give his name. And you can see afterwards, that's what they do. Well, I guess you could say they're protesting around it. They're cleaning the place up peacefully, but it's kind of interesting with that interaction there, because even I said, by the looks of it, you must really be in an odd situation as a police officer if you're going to arrest, like, I guess the war veteran, if that's the right way to say it. But it shows you, depending on what mindset you're on, you could have a completely different view. Whereas if you look at the actual facts, they tell you like a completely different story. So what do you believe afterwards? I think that's a perfect example. You can't just immediately jump the gun and say these people are like this or that. You have to understand everything in context. Because apparently in, I guess, Ottawa, now you have citizens as counter-protesters, like here, what? It says counter-protesters marching against Flew Trucks Clan, occupying their city. At the same time, then you have other, I guess, posts. It says, an Ottawa resident welcomes freedom protesters and says the event has been 100% peaceful. To me, it just feels like there's a huge conflict in terms of information. Depending on what you read, that's what you're going to believe the situation is like. So really, the only people who could tell us are those who are actually on site, if that makes sense. It still makes me think of that point. So much division, why don't you just, quote, talk to them formally? It doesn't make sense to me what's going on, and it just doesn't add up so far. One thing it makes me think of too, I guess, in seeing videos like this, you can't actually just say it's only, quote, truckers. It seems like it's just morphed into something so much bigger, because obviously they're not in trucks, but they're protesting, I guess, in terms of things like mandates and the way things are being handled by the sounds of it. It reminds me of, let's just say, a company where the allegation is they've been so abusive to people in general, but publicly they say, no, our employees love us. So now, I guess, after all these years, you have, say, one group of people who work in customer service that says, that's it, we're not doing anything anymore. And with that, it's a chain reaction where initially people said, oh, it's those basically customer service people, who cares, they're a minority. But now you have people from manager departments, maybe development, logistics, so you can't just say it's not one group of people anymore now. That's how big it kind of sounds like it's getting. Alright, see you guys later.